Hey everybody, Elizabeth Nader with you, Jersey First TV. We are bringing you a District 11 candidate forum, and I'm happy to be on here with my colleague Matt Rooney from Save Jersey. Matt, thanks for doing this with us.
Always a pleasure to do it with you, Elizabeth.
We have a lot of fun together, and we're going to make this interesting for CD11. The reason we're doing this, Matt, is there was a convention last Friday night in Morris County for the Morris County line for the Congressional District 11. And as a result of no one getting the majority of the many candidates we're running for that congressional seat, we are now in a runoff situation. So we're down to two candidates, Larry Kasha and Typhoon Selen. We invited them both to come onto this forum tonight to provide the county committee voters with further insight into the candidates as the runoff starts tomorrow, Thursday, with online voting, and Friday in-person voting. So that is what we are trying to provide to county committee tonight. We do only have one of the candidates with us, though, and that is Larry Kasha. So I'm going to bring him in, Matt, and then you can tell us all about how we're going to run this. So we're going to bring in Larry and put Matt back in right there so Larry can be cozy between us. Larry Kasha,
yes,
thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Matt, I'm going to hand it off to you. Go ahead and outline how we're going to run this.
Sounds like a plan. So the rules are fairly simple and will be familiar to anyone who's seen a forum or a debate before. There is going to be the opportunity for a 2-minute introduction by the candidate. Then there's going to be 6 questions for which the candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. We're very high tech around here, so Elizabeth is going to raise her hand when you've reached the mark, and then that's when you need to very quickly wrap up. And then we'll also have the opportunity for a 2-minute closing remark from the candidate.
Okay. Any questions, Larry? You're good?
No, it's relatively straightforward. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Larry, if you're ready, you can give us your 2-minute introduction.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank both Elizabeth and Matthew and Jersey First for putting this together. You see, it's just so important for the voters to get information directly from the candidate so they can go into the voting booth and make an informed decision. I'd also like to thank the people who are watching this evening. Many of you are county committee like I am. We had a long but important evening on Friday. And it's a testament to the fact that you love this country as much as I do that you're watching this evening. You see, we live in very tumultuous times. We have Russia invading Ukraine, and the ramifications are just being felt around the world. We have open borders. We have crime in our streets and shootings in our cities. We have gas prices that are beyond anything we ever imagined. Inflation that's out of control. We haven't seen this inflation in 40 years. We have parents who rightfully so are upset with the fact that they're losing the ability to make medical choices for their kids and curricular decisions for their children. And we have a woke cancel culture society that's just doing away with free speech. And what we really need right now is someone with experience going to Washington. And I humbly suggest to the people that are watching that I'm that individual. You see, I've had the unique experience, because I've lived in this district my whole life, of representing the people of this district, both professionally and as a public servant. And you might think that these times are absolutely unique, but they're not. They might be unusual, but they're not unique. You see, we've lived through double-digit inflation, rioting in our streets, and a Soviet Union that was out of control. And I've lived through policies that can be implemented to push back, to make certain that this world becomes a sane place and Washington becomes a sane place as well. So with that, I hope that over the course of this program, I'm able to convince you that I am that individual, and that you'll send me to Washington so we can strike some sense of sanity back into our mainstream. And with that, why don't we let the games begin?
All right, Larry, thank you so much. I'm going to start in the category of foreign policy and energy. So my first question to you, and again, 2 minutes, please, to respond. With the conflict in Ukraine and its effects on energy prices, what are your views on government support for alternative energy sources like solar, wind, and hydrogen? And what role should fossil fuels like oil and natural gas play in ensuring U.S. energy security?
Well, renewable energy is it has its place in our world, but it should be governed by the free market society. What we have right now is an immediate crisis, and we need to get over that immediate crisis and get the situation in the Ukraine over with before we start focusing on those renewable energies. What we need to do is open the over 400 oil wells that have been shut down, which the Biden administration just doesn't want to do, and which Mikey Sherrill is completely silent on, with the exception of the fact that she sent out a press release yesterday indicating that we're going to open up oil reserves, which are really just maybe 3 days worth of relief for us. If we were to implement an opening of those oil wells, that's a tomorrow fix. And then reinstitute the construction of the Keystone Pipeline, which is a longer-term fix. Now, granted, we're getting through an area where technology will take over and we'll have these renewable energies. But right now, what we need to do is ease the pain in our country and become an oil exporter again, as opposed to an oil importer. And what that does as well is it frees the European bloc from the independence that they have right now on Russia for energy purposes. So what we need to do is reinstitute our oil wells, become an oil exporting nation again, and on a temporary basis, that'll resolve the issues that we have.
Okay, so another foreign policy question.
Mm-hmm.
If China were to follow Russia's lead and try to reclaim Taiwan by force, how should the United States respond?
What we can't do is act in a position of weakness. The one thing that we have learned throughout history is that tyrannical thugs like Putin don't respond well to weakness. What they do is they keep pushing back and pushing back and pushing back. So if we were to respond from a position of weakness with regard to China and Taiwan, we're going to end up with the same situation. But now we have we have two fronts. We have one in the Far East and we have one in Eastern Europe that we're then going to have to control. What we will need to do, as I see it, and again, I'm not the commander in chief, I'll be a member of Congress, so I'll be vocal about it, is to show force in the China Sea to make certain that we've got an aircraft carrier there so they realize that they just can't run rampant over Taiwan.
Okay. All right, Matt?
Admiral Mike Mullen, who served as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, once said that the biggest threat to our national security is the national debt. Yeah. So if you're successful and you head to Congress starting in January, which policies will you pursue in Washington, D.C. to help get our national debt finally under control?
Matt, you threw me a softball. Thank you. I appreciate that. I am a big proponent of going forward with a balanced budget. What we need to do, though, is we need to let people understand the magnitude of the debt that we have right now. We have $30 trillion in debt. And what I use as an example is I tell people, if I owe you $1 million and I'm going to pay you $1 every second, it's going to take just $11 to pay you back, 11 days rather to pay you back. If I owe you $1 billion, it's going to take 31 years. If I owe you $1 trillion, it's going to take 31,000 years. And our country is $30 trillion in debt. It's going to cripple us. Pretty soon, all we're going to be doing is paying debt service. We're not going to have money to run other programs. So what I propose is this, and it was something that was proposed years ago by Paul Ryan, who, if you remember, ran for vice president. And he called it the penny program. And basically what it was this. You have a balanced budget. Then what you do is you have every agency take 1%, 1 penny out of a dollar, 1%, and earmark that towards reduction and then elimination of debt. In Paul Ryan's situation, it would have taken 10 years to eliminate our debt altogether. Think of all the billions and actually trillions of dollars that would be freed up if we were able to get rid of all of that debt service without diminution in services, because we're only talking about 1% out of each agency. We get rid of the debt. It might take a little longer than 10 years because we owe a whole lot more money than when Paul Ryan was in office, but we can get rid of our debt and free our country from the reins of, believe it or not, China, who buys most of our debt right now.
Last year, the Biden administration signed on to a global minimum tax agreement that would require multinational companies to pay at least 15% on their global earnings. What is your opinion of this particular global agreement, and should Congress take legislative steps to implement the agreement?
What we need to do is make our economy more competitive. Unfortunately, what we have to do is we've got to compete with countries like China, who subsidize their companies with, in essence, on occasion, slave labor. And we have American companies who are using Chinese companies right now to import their products. If we were to have a global tax on top of the taxes that we already have, it will force our companies further and further away, so that we have American jobs leaving our country as opposed to coming back into our country the way they did a couple of years ago. We need to remember that it's the American worker that we need to make certain is able to pay the mortgage and feed their families.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a multi-pronged question here. All right.
Okay. Should I be taking notes? Multi-pronged?
I think you'll get it.
Okay. All right.
The first part is, what is the one issue you will champion as a member of Congress and why? And I want you to answer that and then tell us what your greatest strength is and what your opponent's greatest weakness is.
You know, that's a difficult question because there are so many issues that we need to address. We need to address our borders at this point. People in New Jersey might think that what happens at the southern border doesn't affect us. But I released a video not too long ago of a worker on the tarmac in Westchester Airport indicating that there were individuals getting off that airplane who were illegal immigrants coming, in essence, to Madison, New Jersey. So what we need to do is secure our borders. I've been in business now for 40 years, and I've learned that what you need to do is to hire the best people that you can hire. Give them a job, let them do that job, and then ask them what tools they need in order to do the job properly. What we don't need is a bunch of Congress people deciding what we need to do to fix our southern border. What we need to do is ask the professionals that we already have in place. We have the Border Patrol in place. Just ask them. If you need the wall, we'll give you the wall. If you need other tools, we'll need to give it to you. Now, as far as addressing what my strengths are over our other candidate, it's experience. There's no substitute for experience. And what we shouldn't be doing is having somebody go to Congress and getting a learning curve on the floor of the House, especially in these times. What we need is somebody to go to Congress and have that experience, both life and political, to make certain that the people of the 11th Congressional District are looked out after.
So, Matt, I think I'm going to ask you to ask both of your last questions because I think we have a little more time. So if you would do that, add in the second one as well.
Mission accepted. Not a problem. Larry, it seems sometimes in the larger debate concerning SALT, state and local taxes, and whether they can be deducted, it seems like it's often less of a Republican versus Democrat issue as a low tax versus high tax state issue. So, where do you stand on SALT, first of all? And secondly, assuming you want to lift the SALT cap, how would you go about convincing your fellow Republicans in lower tax red states to support you in lifting that cap?
Okay, it's multi-pronged. Yes, multi-pronged. Here's the situation. People don't realize that for every dollar that we send down to Washington, we only get pennies on the dollar back. There are some states, like Kentucky, that for every dollar they send to Washington, they get $4.38 back. And then those are the particular types of states that then look at New Jersey and say, well, you're inefficient. And as a result of that, you really shouldn't have the SALT deduction. What you need to do is get your act under control. Well, that's easy for them to say when they're using New Jersey tax dollars, our tax dollars that we're sending down to Washington to help subsidize their states when they're getting $4.38 for every dollar they send back. What we need to do is get the SALT deduction back in place. And the way you do that is you attach it to a bill that you know is going to pass. Now, Mikey Sherrill had the opportunity of doing that in the not too distant past. But instead, what she decided to do was hook it to the Build Back Better Act that, in essence, was going to go nowhere. And she knew it because the Democrats really don't care whether or not we get the SALT deduction back or not. What she should have done was attach it to a bill that she knew was going to pass, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, that, and when they call it bipartisan, but there were issues there, and we redefined what the definition of infrastructure was there. But she needed to attach it to a bill that she knew was going to pass if she was really serious about getting the SALT deduction back in place. She obviously isn't. So that's what we need to do, is we need to get that back in place. And we need to get additional dollars back from Washington because, let's face it, New Jersey is in a unique position in the Northeast corridor. We have deep water ports. We have New York and Boston to the north of us, Philadelphia, Washington, Baltimore to the south of us. We're uniquely positioned to be a real driving force in our economy. So what we need to do is get dollars back from Washington to make that happen, to create additional jobs in New Jersey so that we don't have to worry about the fact that we have taxes the way we do right now. What we need to worry about is getting money back in the door and then reducing our taxes so that, and as we get that money back in the door from Washington, we can then give it to the municipalities so they can reduce those taxes as well.
So we're talking about state and local tax deductions. This is a federal election, obviously, but the governor of New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy, continues to loom large over state politics and all of our elections in this state. Over the course of the past 2 years, he's implemented harmful, often unilateral mandates that have had ramifications for years to come for our children, our seniors, children with disabilities. What role, if any, Larry, do you think that the federal government, specifically Congress, has in pushing back against future abuses of power, as we've seen in New Jersey over the course of the past 2 years? And do you have any specific initiatives in this regard that you would pursue were you to be sent to Washington, D.C. beginning in January?
What we need to realize is this, that all politicians tend to react to the almighty dollar. And if in essence there is money that's coming into the state of New Jersey through federal grants, that we need to make certain that those dollars that are coming back into the state of New Jersey are implemented properly. And that if there are other programs that are injurious to our citizens that are being implemented by our Democratic Assembly and Senate and governor, that they realize that the strings that are attached to those dollars might be pulled back so that it makes their job even more difficult to implement the programs that they have in place. Now, again, to talk about the things that I want to do as far as going down to Washington that will affect programs in the state of New Jersey. We are the most populous state on a per capita territory basis anywhere in the nation. We deserve more dollars back to help with our infrastructure, to help with our municipalities' infrastructures as well, to help with our school systems, and to help with our basic government. And we're not getting those. So one of my main objectives in going down to Washington is to make certain that we get our fair share back. We need to get at least a buck on a buck.
Okay, Larry, thank you. Matt, thank you. I'm going to ask you now, Larry, if you would give us a close, what you want the voters to hear and remember from you as they walk into the voting booths Thursday and Friday.
Well, I appreciate, again, the fact that you organized this evening, and I appreciate the fact that people continue to listen as we went through this program. What I want people to realize is this. The next 2 days, we are making a crucial decision. We are deciding on the individual that's going to go toe to toe with Mikey Sherrill and not only just hold her own, but beat her. It's crucial because the individual that beats her is also going to be going down to Washington. And it's going to take experience and tenacity. Now, people view lawyers differently. Some like them, some don't. But as a successful lawyer over the last 40 years, I can tell you this. On a daily basis, I've gone toe-to-toe with people, and I've won. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been successful. And I can take that same skill set and use it against Mikey Sherrill, because you see, all we really need to do is make people realize that the decisions that she's making and her lack of speaking up on issues are directly affecting not only their pocketbooks, but our security. And if we do that, we're going to win. But a candidate isn't going to be able to do it on their own, no matter who it is. This is going to be a we situation, because when I go to Washington, it's going to be a we situation. I'm down there representing you, and I will always remember that. You've got my word on that. And I appreciate your time and effort. Thank you, everyone, for staying and listening to me this evening.
Okay, Matt, you want to wrap us up?
Happily. Thank you, Larry Kasha, for participating tonight. Thank you to my friend and co-moderator, Elizabeth Nader, for organizing this event and all the great work you do. And of course, folks, our participant tonight said this, but I'll add to it briefly. We know that we're in a time period where our country and certainly our state are facing monumental challenges. So regardless of who your candidate is in either the 11th district or any of the other districts that are currently being contested, we definitely urge you to participate. If there was ever a time where it was important to get off the bench and into the field, 2022 is it. So if you take nothing else away from tonight's experience, hopefully it inspired you to take that step, because we need you out there.
Well said, Matt. Thank you so much. And thank you to Save Jersey for helping us with this. Larry, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was my privilege.
To everyone in CD11 and to our audience, thank you for watching. Share this with anyone else that you think needs to see it. And everyone have a great night.